Hi, I'm Terry Crime with Heavy Duty Powertrain. I do the tech support for L10, M11, and 14 Cummins electronical issues. I do not do the mechanical issues. You need that kind of help, then you need to contact your closest Cummins distributor. Okay, one of the issues that's really predominant out there is the existing wiring that was used probably when you bought your truck uh, that supplies the power to the ECM, the power and ground. And a lot of things have changed probably since you bought your truck, especially in the 90s. Issues that's come up that, uh, especially if you find that your ECM gets its power off the starter solenoid and the ground goes to your starter body. This is a real bad design because whenever you start the engine, what happens is the starter, especially over time, starts dragging a little bit, and being that the ECM's married power supply wise to the starter, you crank it, and what happens is the voltage starts dropping that supplies the ECM. And on that note, the ECM drops below 6.2 volts, and I've even seen it just getting down around 8 volts. The ECM won't have enough power to either energize or puts it in a low voltage situation where it's really not got enough power to really fire the injectors correctly and supply the 5-volt reference and power up the fuel solenoid. So that particular wiring is really needs to go away. And in most cases, you got to be really careful, especially if you got a no-start situation um, and you're not getting 12 volts to the fuel solenoid. The really right way to do it is to go down there and normally you find 2 purple wires and I forget the color wire. It kind of varies for the ground, but most of it is like 12 gauge wire. And so if you find coming out of that harness 3 wires, usually 2 of them are purple and the other one may be green or red or blue or something like that. But one of them would be the ground if you find it going to the starter starter housing itself. So at any rate, you may have a plastic connector there, but what I would do, because I've seen problems in the plastic connector where they corroded or shorted out and gotten hot, what happens is that wiring really is taken abuse over low starting situations, or maybe your starter's going out. And what that low voltage does is really heat up the wires, and I've seen them melt and fuse between the hot and the ground, which causes an issue, what I call is dirty voltage. And that can really trick you out there when you're testing the voltage. You may check the voltage at the fuel solenoid or the voltage going in from that supply, and you think it's got 12 volts, but because the ground's feeding through it, it's really not a good clean 12 volts, and it will definitely raise havoc on supplying the ECM with power. On that note, the best thing to do is to cut those wires off right there at the starter that supply the ECM power. Now, the next step is really important. You need to go back to the ECM and the harness in between the ECM and the firewall, and you need to find out where those 3 wires are, and you need to pull them wires out of there and get right back to the basic. And what I found is that all the wiring issues seem to be when they get hot and melt and fuse, seem to be in the first foot away from the starter solenoid, back in there where you can't see it. But at any rate, there could be corrosion, could be a lot of different things going on there. And the smart thing to do is to pull that old wiring out of there, and it's important you do that, because if you go and hot wire in between the ECM and the firewall there, and you find the hot wires up there by the plug, and you go ahead and say, well, I'll run good power to one battery, which that's what we want to do, and you've got that existing wires that are still hooked up to your power and your ground, and they're still raising havoc. So you want to pull that out of there and go all the way back to the plug, and cut that off as short as you can, and maybe and assure that those wires are good, and leave yourself at least 3-4 inches for the 2 hots and the 1 ground, and then simply wire that to 1 battery. And you also want to put fuses on all 3 of these wires, the ground and the 2 hots. The 2 hots should be, to be safe, you can put a 10 amp fuse in there, and the same way with the ground. Now what the, I guess, you know, then you've got everything covered. And that assures that you got good power going into the ECM, unless, you know, the plug itself going into the ECM's got corrosion, or the pins, one of the pins are bent, or there are some other scenarios. But basically, if this just started happening and you lost power and you can't start the truck, even out on the road, that's the first thing you want to do, is ensure that the ECM's getting good power and ground going into it. So if you start off with that, and I forgot something that's real important, the battery that you're hooking up to, you want to hook it to 1 battery and make sure that's your, you know, one of your best batteries all the time, because a dead cell can cause all this problem of your ECM or your truck not starting. I've seen it. So on that note, now you've gotten to a point that you got good power going into the ECM, and you go back and follow the steps, like I said, basically going back to, well, now let's turn the key on, make sure you got good key switch power, and the solenoid should have a nice hard click, and it should have 12 volts there, and you go ahead and start it. And if it doesn't start, you get your Noid light or an ejector tester and see if you got a signal coming out of the ECM. If you don't, then you want to replace the cam sensor. It's really hard to check a cam sensor, but $55 part, put a new cam sensor on it. And if it still won't start, something's happened to the ECM, probably from low voltage constantly, and it shorted out the ECM, but you need an ECM. So that kind of sums it up, really, to determine if you need an ECM or not. So I hope that helps you. Sorry that was a little lengthy. I'm not a movie star or anything, so I'm just an average guy out here that knows a little bit about ECM. So just give me a call at 727-787-6495, and I'll try to help you get that truck started or determine if you need an ECM or not. Please visit www.heavydutypowertrain, that's spelled TRAIN.com, and have a nice day.